Alright everyone, I choose not to mature. I choose not to become old. I choose not to become an out-of-touch fuddy-duddy. I am young enough, just young enough, to remember the ire that was heaped on my generation, and still is to an extent, mainly because of the mistakes of older generations in our upbringing and in managing economies and diplomacy and things like that. So when I see a lot of people bent out of shape at like Gen Z influencers, and with their Xanny-Eyes, which they almost inevitably have, which is probably a sign of the times of the drugs they're on. It's different from the eyes of the millennial. We were the Ritalin kids. Now you've got like the Adderall and Xanny kids. It's a subtle difference. A lot of deformities there, by the way. I don't blame the younger generation for the fact that some of the influencers there are zonked out. In fact, most of them. And that's because of several things. When millennials came of age in the internet era, and we began establishing influence, becoming content creators like myself, etc., some people became massively wealthy and famous, and gaming streams and stuff like that. A lot of it was organic. That is, that a person, a talent scout, like Justin Bieber, for example. I hate to give an example that most of you dislike, although he's less unpalatable than some of the trash that comes out these days. Justin Bieber was making YouTube videos when he was a fucking teenager. And literally, I believe a talent scouter or somebody found his channel and was like, oh shit, this kid's got talent, we're going to try to sign him up. And the rest is history. It was very organic. It wasn't the result of an upfront deal with YouTube like you can get now. Basically, if you say the right things, YouTube will hand you money and promote you in the algorithm simply because you have the views that Google wants to promulgate. It's very inauthentic. There's less engagement, I think, than there was before, etc., etc. That's just one example. What's happened is that you have a combination of factors. Number one, you've had pervasive propaganda aimed at Gen Z by older generations, especially older millennials, Gen X, their teachers and staff and parents as well. So you've got prevalent propaganda from the legacy media, from the powers that be. Government is involved. It's basically a giant social experiment. Then you've got the astroturfing, and then you've got peer pressure. So when you look, for example, at the prevalence of people, lopping off their dicks and stuff like that, it's often because of peer pressure. It's not dysmorphia in most cases at this point. I do not blame them because they are young. And what do young people do? Some of them go along with the curve. Some of them rebel. I've seen an awful lot of backlash as well among the younger generations. It's probably going to extend into Gen Alpha as well. At least the older echelon, which is now approaching double-digit age range. I think, what's the cutoff for Gen Alpha? Like 9 years old or something right now? So, they're getting on towards their tweens. They're going to start rebelling. It'll be funny to see what they're rebelling against. I can't wait for the next generation. It's going to be hilarious. It's going to be hilarious. And then the same thing will happen. Gen Z will consider them extreme and say, well, you need to grow up. Now, fuck that shit. When you start looking at younger people and ridiculing them and their ideas, keep in mind where those ideas came from. They're a transmogrification of earlier ideas. I talked this morning, for example, about the Reddit, the Wiccans, the Wiccan wannabes. They're using terminology and occult practices and spiritual ideas that come from the fucking Victorian era. But they don't come directly from that. They were already transmogrified by the boomers in the 1960s. It's the same fucking terminology. It's the same fucking idea. It's the same crystals and binding and no, don't worry, it's just white magic. I've got a lot of salt on hand and stuff like that. It's the same fucking shit. It's the same bullshit. Occultism goes in waves. It oscillates, almost like a vibration, you could say. It's the same idea. I don't blame Gen Z for having wonky ideas, nor do I think all the ideas are necessarily wonky at all. People will say, well, the kids aren't all right. Well, no, they'll be fine, don't worry. And then they'll get old, and most of them will fall in line, and they'll do the same fucking shit that every other generation did. When I was younger, I genuinely thought, naive as I was in my early 20s, that the millennials were finally going to put a stop to the military-industrial academic complex, the powers that be, the uniparty machine. We're making inroads, by the way, finally in doing so with the MAGA movement. I noticed that millennials are top-heavy with regards to populism, which I think is a very good thing and speaks good about our generation. Probably one of the only things it does. And there's some good retro music, but other than that, and inventing dubstep, I can't think of many other accomplishments, unfortunately. Ours is a little bit of a lost generation, but it wasn't our fault either. Our generation has been strangulated economically. It's been run through multiple wars and economic crises. All hell has broken loose multiple times while we've been of age or near of age. It's not entirely our fault. We were brought up in a decadent society structured by boomers who siphoned away all the wealth and are still hoarding it to this day. No offense to any boomer clankers out there, but many boomers acted in such a manner. Like, my dad's a boomer, and he never did the yuppie thing. He was a chef and shit like that, so we come from a working class background. But from that core middle and upper middle class, there was a lot of wealth siphoning, really. And then the even older generation, like the Bidenites, the so-called greatest generation, they've hoarded even more of it. They still cling to power like the grasping misers that they are. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with this generation. It certainly doesn't have anything to do with Gen Z. Gen Z's looking at their grandparents wondering when they're going to croak, basically, at this point, because they've strangulated the economy so much. And they start wars and all of these other crazy things, and it's just not positive for the world. When I look at the influencers, so-called, also, mainly astroturfed at this point, among the younger generation, you know, people who stream Roblox for $100,000 a pop or something and got a contract up front to do so, while spouting political commentary, oftentimes, you'll know. That's not necessarily indicative of the average person in the younger generation anyway. Interact with some Gen Zers. You'll find that a lot of them are actually pretty based. And by the way, the same sort of hegemon predominates in the youth anyway. When millennials were younger, what were we doing? We're throwing around slurs that would get you banned online. Virtually all of us were. Don't fucking try to deny it. Unless you were goody two-shoes, the teacher's pet, you were saying the F word. You were saying the N word, etc., etc., etc. You told off college because you're young. That's what young people do. They rebel. They go crazy. They do crazy shit. They get older and then usually they calm down. Some of us refuse to do so. Gen Z is doing the same thing. Look at all of the so-called influencers among Gen Z, where it comes out, and they get well known, and then a DM is leaked from 5 years before anyone knew who they were, where they tell an off-color joke, and then they have to do the humiliation ritual thing, apologize strenuously, and hope that they still have a career. That's the name of the game, by the way. I would advise people, younger people, if you've got an internet footprint, scrub everything as soon as you become well known. That's probably a good idea. That dormant account might very well get leaked at some point. Oh, you know, this account, 1488Nkilla, is that yours? Because the IP is the login is the same. Oh, you mean you were the one telling these jokes on Facebook back in the day? You know, back when Boomer Book existed. You know, 10 years from now, that'll probably be a thing. Oh, well, you know, you're going to get deplatformed now. Your bank will stop working. You scrub yourself. You know, make sure to keep tabs on your old accounts from when you were a teenager because you might need to get into them and delete them at some point. You should probably get on that now. Sanitize yourself. I'm still waiting for some particularly intelligent group of young people to be truly subversive, cast themselves off as very sanitized, and do the sanitized thing, get big, and then reveal who they really are. Sort of like if you wanted to infiltrate the Catholic Church, so at a young age you said, you know what, I'm going to take it over for devil worship, so I'm going to pretend to be a God-fearing Catholic, join the priesthood, and work my way up until I become a cardinal. Then just crash and burn the local system and chuckle at them. By the way, this was done once by the Freemasons at one point. The Leo affair. Very, very interesting. It was a black eye on the Catholic Church at the time, but we won't get into that. I don't blame them for the Xanny-Eye influencers. It's not indicative sample size, number one. It's astroturfed, number two. And number three, again, people change over time. The kids are all right. It'll be fine. That's about all. Peace out.